But then, okay, is he this like twisted, maniacal family man? Is he, for all intensive purposes, a family guy?
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs, the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host with the toast, RyeToast, here, talking about Five Nights at Freddy's as we typically do. No preamble for this one. I mean, very briefly, I know we missed last week. The whole fam came down with COVID and we were just kind of recovering for 7 or 8 days. So everything kind of got discombobulated, but we should be back on track moving forward. We're all better. We were all vaccinated, luckily. So we're doing good. But as far as today's topic goes, we're talking more about the FNAF Timeline. Specifically, I want to talk about like the beginning of it in relation to Sister Location, Circus Baby's Pizza World, FNAF 2, and the early deaths. So this will kind of be a good bridge for this past week's video on Balloon Boy and Circus Baby's Pizza World, and next week's video, which, surprise, spoilers I guess, is going to be on the early deaths in the franchise, specifically the crying child Elizabeth Afton, Charlotte Emily, and the missing child incident. I feel like a big job of making a FNAF timeline is figuring out a good and compelling order for those 4 events. They're kind of like the big first 4 events in the franchise, right? Because they dictate a lot of other things, like Fredbear's closing, Freddy Fazbear's closing, Circus Baby Pizza World, and by extension Sister Location, and of course the animatronics getting haunted. It's one of those things that you could argue a lot of different orders and not be wrong. So it's weird to argue in a vacuum what deaths you think come in what order, because like I said, they inform the timeline around them, and you can't, I would argue you can't really conclusively prove one order outside of the greater context of a timeline. I do genuinely think that at least 4 or 5 different combinations are fully plausible and evidence-backed because the amount of information we have from that section of the timeline is so sparse. I mean, like, I was taking notes for this week's video. I've got like 2 pages right here. It's in pencil on like yellow paper, so you can barely see it. These are filled, I promise you. But it was essentially like, this was just information, like not even speculation, just information about the 4 different events. And then this one was information about the other surrounding events. I won't go into too much about what I think the proper order is, because I go into that a lot more in detail with evidence in Saturday's video, like this upcoming video. But I just want to talk about like specifically how these deaths move things around, right? So let's go through the information, I think is the best way to do this. And we'll start with, I guess the way I wrote this down, I put Crying Child first. So Crying Child is interesting for 2 reasons. One, we don't technically know when the Crying Child dies. It seems pretty, it's not confirmed by any means, but it's pretty heavily suggested that the bite that we see the crying child suffer from puts him into a coma, and then he dies later, right? Or like it doesn't kill him immediately, right? We have all of the hospital imagery in the FNAF 4 Nightmares, and we see people talking to the crying child after the bite. So it seems more likely that the crying child took severe damage and then, was alive for some stretch of time and then later died. That seems a lot more likely than instantaneous death, which brings up some interesting points. For one, it does make me hesitate to assume that the crying child is possessing Golden Freddy. I think it makes a lot of sense for the crying child to be possessing at least part of Golden Freddy because of "It's me." Right, it's me, and there's a couple other lines that Golden Freddy has in FNAF 1 that really feels like the crying child reaching out to Michael Afton. But then there's also the question of, is the vengeful spirit within of Golden Freddy doing that on behalf of the crying child? Because I think something that's really important when considering the crying child's spirit is Alone Together. So Alone Together is one of the Tales from the Pizzaplex book, one of the stories from Tales from the Pizzaplex, and it deals with I don't remember the kid's name. It's been a while since I've read it. I've just have the notes that are relevant written down, and the kid's name is not relevant realistically. But a kid in that story, nobody really pays attention to him. His dad barely talks to him, only talks to him like every now and then. And he just kind of goes through the motions. But his grandmother, he always loves to talk to on his way back from school, and she talks at length with him. Eventually he starts getting these like daydreams and real dreams about building a mechanical Turk, which is essentially an old machination from like the 1600s, where the idea was it was an automaton that would play chess with you. But realistically, someone was hiding in the box doing the chess moves, and it was like an illusion. And he gets the vision that he wants to build this for his woodshop class. Not a vision. He gets like he keeps thinking about this mechanical Turk box. And he eventually, his father builds one and destroys it, and he's so confused at like why his father took the time to build it just to break it. And he starts to realize that these memories feel separate from him, and that it feels like a ghost is telling him to build this. So he talks to his grandmother about it, and his grandmother gives us some great information on how ghosts function within the FNAF universe. Hold on. I just realized my collar is like inverted, and it's like, it feels weird on my neck. I got a whole bunch of new shirts for recording. I'm really happy with them. This is like, it's purple. It might be hard to see on the camera, but it is purple, and it's got like a nice texture to it. I wanted to get like a lot more button shirts to look like I'm actually like, you know, professional, not wearing some schlubby graphic tee. Like my, I just took this off to record my good old Cracker Barrel graphic t-shirt. I don't love Cracker Barrel or anything. I just worked there for like 4 years, so they gave us a t-shirt for Labor Day or something. I bought a whole bunch of new shirts just for recording, and I'm really happy with them. Anyway, sidetrack. ADHD be like. But his grandmother gives us a lot of good information on how spirits can function in Five Nights at Freddy's. The dog is in the kitchen above me if you hear stomping or nails hitting wood or whatever. One of the most important things is that when a ghost is attaching, ghosts can attach themselves to someone to try to reach out to them, right? And one of the signs of that is that your dreams can be affected by this spirit, and you'll have memories that aren't necessarily yours. Which I think informs a lot about how Michael was connecting with the crying child, and we'll get into that. But then the big twist of the story is we find out that this ghost that he's communing with made a mechanical Turk and maybe is trapped inside of it. So he goes into this old abandoned shed that like nobody looks at the school, and he finds buried deep in that shed is the mechanical Turk he's been having these dreams about. So he opens it and gets inside, and it gets stuck, and he realizes he's stuck in there, but he opens the fake wall and he finds a body, his body. And at that moment, his memories come back, because his grandmother also said that a spirit loses their memory and cannot move on until their body is found. And that could even be by themselves. Then the twist happens where you realize the reason nobody talks to this kid is because he's literally a ghost. And that's why the one girl that like talked to him at school didn't want to be seen talking to him, because she would look crazy. His grandmother, lo and behold, died a while back, and she knew about it and was trying to help her grandson move on. The story ends ambiguously, but it seems like he found peace at least. So I've used this story in the past to explain Give Gifts, Give Life. I don't think Charlotte is literally the one who stuffs the bodies into the suits, as some people has argued. I think what happened, right? Charlie's body is very public. She's left in the street after she's killed, so she knows she's dead, right? Presumably using that rule that, like, you don't have your memories until your body is found, Charlotte knows that she died. And that's why she's so easily able to possess the puppet and help with all the other stuff. The missing child incident is so notable because their bodies are never found. They're in the suits. So I've been thinking since Alone Together that the missing child incident is Charlotte leading the spirits to their bodies and then they wake up. So because of that, the missing child incident is, I know this is because of the crying child, we will get there, but because of that, the missing child incident doesn't necessarily have to take place before or after Charlotte Emily's death. Because even if the missing child incident takes place before Charlotte Emily is killed, those kids, more than likely using these rules, would have just been like playing at the pizzeria until somebody intervened, that being Charlotte Emily. She was probably the one where when she died and possesses the puppet, she finds these spirits wandering the pizza place, not sure what's going on. And we see that in Happiest Day in FNAF 3, where we see, like, it's a pizza place and then a spirit just crying and alone. And Charlotte Emily is the one to be like, and you're playing as different animatronics, but Charlotte Emily is the one to be like, hey, you're not alone. Let me help you. And she's giving cakes or giving life. So I think that is the missing child incident and how that works. Why do I bring this up with the crying child? The crying child is in a similar situation where the bite is incredibly public, and presumably he dies in a hospital bed. So he has, you would think he has his memories, and I was about to say he has his memories, but in the end of FNAF 4, it seems like he's confused more than anything. He's not sure what's going on. So if his body is buried in the woods in Midnight Motorist, that lump in the woods that we're not really sure what it is, then I could see him not knowing what's going on and needing assistance. And that's why his soul persists so long, because his body isn't in one of the animatronics. They can't find it. So I've always seen the crying child's spirit as being lost, but still being attached to Fredbear's or Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, like one of the restaurants. So when the missing child incident kids are helped by Charlotte, maybe then they find the crying child and they're like, oh, we can't find this kid's body. And that's why he's just a wandering spirit. But as far as putting it in the timeline, it's interesting that there isn't really I've always put the crying child first in the past, because the crying child doesn't really have a necessary prerequisite. The crying child's death can just happen at any point. All it needs is Michael Afton to be alive and younger and the Fredbears to be open, you know? Whereas, like, Elizabeth, you need the fun times to be created. Charlotte Emily, I'd like there for William to have some twisted motive. Obviously, like, he's a child killer. I'm not saying there's ever a good reason to do that, but I would think it would be prudent for storytelling purposes for William Afton to be able to justify his own actions internally. And then the missing child incident in the same way. There needs to be, for me personally, for a compelling timeline, I would want William to have some self-justification for the missing child incident. And I've always put the crying child first because of that, but I'm starting to hesitate. And it's because of last week's video. So I talk about how it seems very likely the Balloon Boy was originally part of the crew meant to open Circus Baby's Pizza World. Now, that's notable because Circus Baby's Pizza World, the opening is when Elizabeth Afton dies, or at least before the opening, because we get that newspaper that Circus Baby's Pizza World is canceled like a week before it was slated to be open or something like that. And we can put together that with the fact that Circus Baby kills Circus Baby kills Elizabeth Afton, that that's probably the reason why Circus Baby's Pizza World was canceled. William Afton just threw away the whole idea after Elizabeth Afton dies. But if Balloon Boy is from Circus Baby's Pizza World, then Circus Baby's Pizza World would have been slated to open before FNAF 2. And if that's true, then there's a possibility that Elizabeth Afton dies before the crying child. Now, there's one major issue with it, and it's an issue I've never really had a great answer for. And maybe one of you guys do, I'm not sure. But it's, why would William Afton create the Funtime animatronics if nothing has happened in the timeline yet? Right? Like, the Funtime animatronics are very child kidnapping centric. So if, like, the crying child's alive and Elizabeth Afton is alive and the missing child incident didn't happen, like, if nothing has happened yet, why is William out here making the Funtime animatronics? It just doesn't track for me. And I want to kind of segue that the questions in this podcast are going to be, 2 of them are going to be talked about in this section because I found them pretty prudent to what we're talking about. One of them is from Undead Possum. Him, thank you for your question. And before we get into it, I should mention, if you want your questions talked about on the podcast, make sure to send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That email is in the description because it's hard to type out. I understand, so you can just copy and paste it. But this question is from Undead Possum. Him, thank you for your question. If you could pick any character in FNAF, what character would you want more information/lore about? And honestly, there are a lot of good picks for this. Charlotte Emily makes a lot of sense. Henry Emily makes a lot of sense. Elizabeth Afton, the crying child, Michael. But honestly, for me, it's William Afton. Because a lot of the timeline is because William Afton did something. So if we could get more information into, like, William Afton's mind and motivations, I think it would be so helpful to know more about this timeline. Because if we know that William Afton is just crazy from the start and from the jump wants to be immortal and wants to find out any way to do it and will sacrifice anything for it, then Funtimes could be the first thing he ever did. Right? The missing child incident could be the first thing he ever does. So, but if William Afton starts out as like a family man terrified of death, and then 2 of his kids get killed from the animatronics that him and Henry are building, then his motivations change. And the missing child incident probably happens later in the timeline after he's lost his mind. So it's one of those things that I wish we had more information about William Afton. And like why he's doing the things he does, because I think it would be so useful in building a timeline if we could have solid motivation behind the main antagonist in the series. I think it's great. Like, I understand this series is built off of cryptic lore, but it's crazy to me that the major antagonist for 80% of these games, we have no idea why he does the things he does. Sure, the books give us information on that version of William Afton, but that is a different version of William Afton. You know, that's the Silver Eyes William Afton, or that's the William Afton from the Fazbear Fright series that we see in, like, the Man in Room 1280. You could argue it is the same William Afton. I believe those are different versions of William Afton. And a lot of that probably does carry over to the games, but we don't know how much carries over to the games, you know? Just like, I think from the games, you can tell at least by FNAF 3, and probably by sister location, William Afton is obsessed with immortality. And whether that's for just him or his whole family, it's hard to say. Because, like, there is the idea that William Afton is trying to recreate his family as animatronics. But then, okay, is he this, like, twisted, maniacal family man? Is he, for all intensive purposes, a family guy? I'm sorry, that was so stupid. I'm just thinking of that fucking cursed, what was it, Pinky Pills? There's some art from one of the artists that got fired for being fucking weird that draws William Afton, but he looks like Peter Griffin, and that's the only thing I can think of right now. Oh, man. But yeah, I think knowing more about William Afton would really help us in forming this timeline. But back to the timeline itself, right? Circus Baby's Pizza World I think at this point, most likely takes place before FNAF 2. Because if Balloon Boy is at the FNAF 2 location, I think, like the Wizards and like the puppet, it was brought to the FNAF 2 location on a smaller budget to try to reinvigorate the franchise. So I think it came from an earlier location. That being said, like I mentioned in this past video, if Circus Baby's Pizza World opens before FNAF 2, does it open before or during the run of the original Freddy's? I think it's possible. Now, when I talk about Circus Baby's Pizza World, I need to be incredibly clear. Sister location, I don't think can happen before FNAF 2. And that's because of the molten MCI theory. So that's just catch you up on that. The molten MCI theory is that the animatronics that the MCI children possess are melted down as remnant and injected into the Funtime animatronics, so that when Ennard forms and then later splits into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy is the missing child incident victims. It's a very common theory. It was recently bolstered by some evidence found in Help Wanted that showed a furnace at the bottom of Sister Location filled with Endo 01s. So I think that's a really solid through line. That makes a lot of sense. Because of that, if that is true, now again, not necessarily confirmed. Molten MCI is not necessarily, it's just not confirmed. It's just a theory I believe in very strongly. If Molten MCI is true, Sister Location I don't think can happen before Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Because in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, somebody puts on a yellow suit in the back, and children are found dead at the restaurant, the Dead Child incident. We see that in Save Them, right? We see the dead kids strewn about the place. And if anyone's going to be doing that, I feel like it has to be William Afton, unless we don't know. Unless there's something about Michael Afton we don't know, I think it has to be William Afton. So that being the case, if William Afton does the Dead Child incident at FNAF 2, he has to be alive, right? He has to be alive for it, that, obviously. If Molten MCI is true, I think Follow Me happens before Sister Location. Follow Me is the FNAF 3 minigames where we see William take apart the FNAF 1 animatronics one by one, and then at the end of it, get scared into the Spring Bonnie suit and die in the back room, turning into Springtrap. I'm starting to more and more believe the idea that the Follow Me minigames are William collecting animatronic parts to use in the Sister Location experiments. And he comes back night after night for them. And then on the 5th night, he comes back for the Spring Bonnie suit. Because in the Silver Eyes, in the movie, in so often in this franchise, it's shown to us that when William Afton is wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, he has some kind of control or is able to fit in better with the missing child incident kids. That Spring Bonnie suit is important for that. So I think it does make a lot of logical sense for William Afton to be coming back night after night to get different animatronic parts for Sister Location experiments. And once he gets Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, he's either coming back for Golden Freddy, or he realizes these Sister Location animatronics are aggressive, and to try to better control them, goes back for the Spring Bonnie suit. And when he goes back after doing these experiments is when he's trapped and becomes Springtrap and dies. So if Follow Me takes place before Sister Location and Molten MCI is true, then Sister Location has to happen after FNAF 2, because William Afton is alive during FNAF 2. So it would be FNAF 2, Follow Me, Sister Location. However, there is an interesting problem here. If Follow Me and FNAF 2, if Follow Me and Sister Location take place after FNAF 2, do they also take place after FNAF 1? Because in FNAF 1, we see the animatronics have been refurbished. And we know in Follow Me, it takes place at the FNAF 1 location. But then there's the issue. One of the more common theories is that sister location takes place before FNAF 1 and before FNAF 2, and the reason Michael keeps getting fired for foul odor is because he's dead after sister location. You see the problem here. If sister location happens first, and the Missing Child Incident kids killed Michael, wear his body, and then leave him, and he turns into that husk, why are the animatronics haunted in FNAF 2 and FNAF 1, and why are they still there when they should be in Ennard? So I think in this version of the timeline I'm slating out right now, Michael is alive when he goes to FNAF 2 and FNAF 1. So the question becomes, why? I think there's two possibilities, and I'm leaning towards one. One possibility is Michael Afton is an accomplice for William Afton until he dies at sister location. And it's a theory I've seen where, not saying that Michael Afton is likes to work with William Afton and likes what's going on, but if Michael Afton was tortured with the FNAF 4 experiments after the death of the crying child, William Afton could definitely turn him into just a yes man. Like, you are my child, I will put you back in that test chamber, you will do what I say. Kind of like how we see William Afton treat Vanessa in the movie. Oh no. Wait, is that what the FNAF movie is trying to tell us? I don't think the FNAF movie is canon to the games at all, obviously. I had been thinking that the FNAF movie was there to tell us that possibly FNAF 1 takes place after Freddy's had already closed. And I still do think that. But we directly see William Afton commanding his child to work for him, and his child eventually betraying him. Is the relationship between William Afton and Vanessa a parallel between William Afton and Michael Afton? Ooh. This was the one I didn't like that much, but suddenly I'm open to it. Because, so the possibility I was thinking beforehand was Michael is trying to get his father caught. So he's trying to find the bodies of the children. And that's why he keeps getting fired for tampering with the animatronics and smelling. We know the animatronics smell. So possibly on those custom nights, he's trying to open up the animatronics and show, look what he did. I found the bodies. But he gets fired before he can do that. But maybe he was trying to cover it up under the command of his father. After all, sister location, we have that monologue from Michael. I did what they were right there, and I put her back together just like you told me to. If William Afton had been torturing Michael with the FNAF 4 experiments, I said that before, and I didn't explain it, to catch you up in case that's confusing. Didophobia, one of the stories from Tales from the Pizzaplex, introduces the concept that a child was held in test chambers that were recreating the FNAF 4 gameplay using hallucinogenic gas and mannequins on rails. And I don't think that story is 100% true to the games, but I think that concept probably is, which explains the monitors in the sister location personal office, that bunker. So if William Afton had been torturing Michael using that, and not just to torture him, but to learn about, illusions, fear, possibly even doing agony or remnant experiments, doing this, he's a very experimental guy. It's interesting to consider that one day that door opens and Michael is saved from it by William, the guy who was doing it. And it's like, I can keep you from there. You just have to do what I say. And I can even bring your brother and your sister back to life if you listen to me. And suddenly he has an unwilling just of a blind follower, which parallels again with Vanessa and Glitchtrap. This manipulative behavior might not have started with Glitchtrap, but all the way back with William Afton, commanding essentially a child to do his dirty work for him. And then Sister Location is that turning point when Michael Afton is killed and turned into this husk of a man and is just seeking out William Afton. Oh, that's such a good story. And that also would then make sense for why Michael Afton is trying to commune with the crying child with the security logbook, and why he feels so compelled to end this because he took part in it. Oh, man. I think I just convinced myself into Michael being complicit. Interesting. I really like that. That's not what I planned to talk about today. I planned to talk about I didn't even talk about Charlotte Emily or realistically Elizabeth Afton. Shit. Oh, that's that might be a future video, and that might be going in my timeline. Well, I guess we'll move on to the rest of our questions, because I kind of didn't talk about the other ones. So a reminder again, if you want your questions talked about on the podcast, email them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. Or if you're on Spotify, there is a feature where you can ask a question directly on Spotify. It should be like a Q&A or something. Either way, I've tried to make it as easy as possible. The email's in the description. You can copy and paste it there. Our next question comes from Yasir. Him, thank you for your question. Do you think the pile of dirt we see in the forest, Midnight Motorist, is a hidden way to enter the Sister Location bunker? This is a great question. It's something that I've brought up in the past. People have brought up good evidence against this. I think it is. I think it is possible, though. I don't know if it's incredibly likely, but I do think it's possible. It's one of those things where we know the Sister Location bunker is near the FNAF 4 house, if not directly connected to it. And we know the Sister Location bunker is connected to where Fredbear's was. But somebody pointed out the clearing in the woods there has the same texture as the parking lot, or like the same layout as the parking lot for juniors. So that clearing in the woods might not just be a clearing in the woods, but it could have been the location of something. People have brought up recently, maybe it's the location of where Fall Fest was. And I think that's very, very likely. Fall Fest always showed us those pine trees in the background, and we see those trees in Midnight Motorist. And in Help Wanted 1, the DLC that takes place in Fall Fest shows us in the middle of the woods with the FNAF 4 house nearby. So that clearing being the location of Fall Fest makes a lot of sense. Here's another wild theory I'm just going to throw out there. Juniors. I've been a big proponent that Juniors is a bar that opened up in where Fredbear's closed down. And I still think that's the most likely option, personally. Just with the location of Fredbear's, Sister Location, and the FNAF 4 house. However, here's another option. Circus Baby Pizza World. Circus Baby Pizza World was a week from opening when it got canceled, which presumes that the building was already made. And if it never opened, now there's suddenly an empty building that needs to be filled. And that would also place Circus Baby's Pizza World right next to the Circus Baby Party and Rental bunker, which makes a lot of sense. So it's one of those things where, like, did Circus Baby's Pizza World plan on... Here's the wild one. What if Circus Baby's Pizza World was going to open up in the location of Fredbear's after it closed down? Which could still happen within the span of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, right? Here's the real quick timeline for you. I'll do the... I forget my video is mirrored. Real quick timeline. Fredbear's opens up, who knows when, early 1980s possibly. Freddy's opens up 1983. Fredbear's closes down either in 1983 or 1984. Circus Baby's Pizza World is about to open up in that Fredbear's building, but doesn't. 1985 missing child incident happens. Late 1985, early 1986, Freddy's 1 closes down. 1987, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opens up again as the FNAF 2 location. That's a possible timeline. I don't know if I believe it, because it would still, I feel like Elizabeth Afton dying before the crying child does work. And I go into that in this week's video, talking about like why William is watching his children with nanny cams at all times, why Elizabeth's room is empty. I go into that a lot. But you could argue it either way. I think that's a valid timeline of Circus Baby's Pizza World was going to open in the building Fredbear's was, and that being shown in the sister location fuse map. Actually, that does make a lot of sense. That's why the sister location bunker was connected to the Fredbear fuses, because it wasn't connected to Fredbear's. It was connected to the building that was going to be Circus Baby's Pizza World. Ooh, I like that actually. Oh no, I like that a lot. Oh no, interesting. If that's true, Elizabeth Afton definitely dies after the crying child, I would say. Because the crying child dies within Fredbear's. Interesting. There's a lot of ways you can look at that. And here I thought, man, this I gotta be writing this down. This stuff changes so much. Hey, at least I got to record it. I can rewatch this. But anyway, I hope that answers your questions. Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. But these next two questions are kind of selfish. They're not really FNAF related, but I wanted to talk about them. Our next question comes from Rechan, he, him. Thank you for your question. Why are you toast? What made you choose a bread as your food sona? Thank you for your question. I'd never read the word food sona before. It's very funny to me. It's simply a pun, realistically. So, my original online username, it's gone through a lot of changes. Way back in the day, like middle school, I was making accounts with the username Ziggurat, which is a Mesopotamian, I believe, temple. It's the type of temple where it's stairs all the way up, just because I thought it was a cool word. I thought it was a really cool word. And then after a while, I wanted to make an account on fml.com, which is dating me. There used to be a website dedicated for FML stories, which is wild to think about in the modern age. But I wanted to make a account there, but my username that I always use was already taken. So instead, I started messing around. I was like, oh, what if I do a pun? My maiden name, I'm not going to say, but it had the letters GRIM in it. So I was like, ooh, what if I do the Grim Reaper? And it'll be a pun on my last name. That was already taken. So for whatever reason, the next thought, and probably because I was like 14 or whatever, but the next thought I had was, oh, I'll just do the Grim Pickler. And that was my username for a very long time. The Grim Pickler was my username for quite a while, like 4 or 5 years. I was probably like close to 11. Because 4 or 5 years, around 15 or 16, I switched from that to, I don't remember I didn't make a lot of usernames after that, actually. No, I really didn't, until I made my first YouTube channel, which I'm not going to say the name of, not because I don't want you to find it or anything. The username for my first YouTube channel and Reddit account and Twitter account was a pun based on my first, middle, and last name, like full legal name. Hey, anyone out there? Don't do that. That's really stupid. Once I tried to do a Let's Play channel, and maybe for like an anniversary, or like if we hit 250 or 300K or something, we can watch those old videos. They're very bad. But I tried to do a Let's Play channel for 5 years maybe. I had been, for anyone who doesn't know, I had been making content in some way and trying to make it as like a YouTuber since like the 6th grade, with a camcorder and some friends making skits. But that didn't work because we were bad at it because we were children. And then come high school, I tried to be a Let's Player for all of high school. And that didn't work. But I was also streaming by senior year of high school. I started streaming on Twitch, and that was very fun. And I streamed throughout all of college. And through college and after college, not consistently. And I wasn't, my big problem, and I guess this is a lesson to anyone out there, I wasn't doing anything else. I would just stream and call it a day, or I would stream and then take my Twitch clips, make them into like very bare bones TikToks and post them on TikTok. And that was it. I didn't do anything else. And like for YouTube, and eventually I swapped. Once I started getting like 4 to 5 viewers on Twitch, I switched from that name that was a pun on my full legal name to RyeToast. Well, it was RyeToast Games because RyeToast is taken everywhere. But it was to RyeToast. And that's just once again, I can't help myself. It's a pun on my name, but it's just my first name this time. My first name is Riley. And I'd been called Rye Bread a lot in my life, not by people who liked me. For whatever reason, throughout middle school, it was apparently really funny to the kids who would like pick on me to call me Rye Bread. And I think it's because they were like calling me basic or whatever. It never like offended me. Like it wasn't a good... Let me tell you, middle school bullies are fucking stupid. They're not good at their job. Like, I mean, sure, some are, but... Even like back then when I was being picked on, there was a part of me that was like, you're not even doing it good. Rye bread isn't that insulting. It was the kind of like picking on where it was fake nice, where it'd be like, hey, Rye Bread, how's it going? Just so they could like sneer to themselves like, oh, we don't actually like this guy. Whatever. But then comes high school, and I, at that point, had found a group of friends that I enjoyed talking to and actually liked me as a person. And they didn't really bother me anymore because it's high school. That kind of like the dynamics change, you know? I think at some point, randomly out of nowhere, thinking I was cool, a kid from my middle school passed me in the hallway and said, hey, Rye Bread. And I turned around thinking it was cool and said, it's RyeToast because I'm hot. No one laughed. No one thought it was funny, but RyeToast did stick. I like RyeToast is a very good, like, it's snappy, it's memorable, it's fun as a username, it's taken everywhere. So I have to find like RyeToast YT, RyeToast Games, like other ways to use the name RyeToast, but I do really like the name RyeToast. And then the toast persona kind of came from that. It was the chicken came before the egg, right? You know what I mean? But yeah, my content journey with that is I switched to RyeToast Games and I would take my Twitch streams and just chop them up into barely edited episodes where I would just take a 4-hour stream, chop it into 30-minute segments, and put an outro on. And that was it. There was no intro. There was no, like, it was, and nobody watched it because why would they? That's not good content. It wasn't even edited to highlights. And I've told this story a million times, but eventually I was working at an office while I was doing all this, and our office did layoffs, and I was one of them. This was after COVID, where we were moving back to the office, and they just did a massive layoff. And it sucked because I had just gotten back from 3 months of paternity leave, and that sounds really generous. It's because it wasn't paternity leave. The way that my job did it was like, oh, you can use all of your vacations and sick days, and then you can take as much of a leave as you want. We're just not going to pay you for it. So I had like 2 weeks of paid leave and then like 2 months of non-paid leave. And I get back, I work for 2 weeks after we're like, okay, we're just barely not in debt. Let me work and get back to it, and we'll clear off the debt that we had accumulated. And 2 weeks later, I get laid off. And it fucked us financially. Which was terrifying when we have a baby. And for like a month, I was doing a bunch of different like applications, trying to get hired places. And I got a job as a substitute teacher, which was great. And I worked as a substitute teacher in a couple different schools for 2 months. And then at one school for a year and a half. And while I was working as a substitute teacher, I realized I have 8 hours out of the day where I'm sitting at a desk and I need to make sure these kids do their work, which isn't a very active job. It's very much, here's your pamphlet. Your teacher gave you instructions. I'll be here if you have any questions. Go to it. You can be on your phones. Just use headphones if you want to listen to music. I don't really care. Just don't be a problem, and it won't be a problem. And I sit down. And then I have 45 minutes to kill. So it was that moment that I was like, I have time to edit at a laptop for 8 hours, realistically, especially when I have off periods. So I have long hair and I have wireless earbuds. So if my former employer is watching this, sorry, I would put an earbud in, put hair over it, and I would just edit videos on a laptop while I was at work. and it worked. I was able to do that and support myself, because substitute teaching does not pay well. It pays dirt. I was making like $2,000 a month, which is like $24K a year, which is like survivable barely with a second job. And I was door dashing too, because I really wanted to pursue this YouTube thing and this Twitch thing. I was going to get a second job after 2 months of substitute teaching. And then December comes around. This is December where Security Breach comes out. And I'm like, I'm a big FNAF fan. On Twitch, I'll play through all the FNAF games, and I'm going to make a FNAF Timeline as my first fully edited YouTube video. And looking back, I think it's still a pretty good video. It's just not the style of content I want to pursue. I think I could make a way better timeline now, and I want to. And I think I did with the game only one, but neither here nor there. That timeline blew the hell up, and I was like, oh, okay, I want to pursue YouTube. How can I do this? So for the next year and a half, I was substitute teaching, door dashing on the weekends and nights, and while I was at my teaching job, I was editing videos for YouTube. So I was working 3 full-time jobs essentially, and killing myself doing it. And then come that spring to summer, probably the hardest time of my life. Most fulfilling. One of the most fulfilling, because YouTube was taking off. But that 6-month period, you couldn't talk to me in real life because I was a shell of a person. But by that summer, that August, one of my videos pops off and another one pops off. And then Game Theory mentions the channel. And then I get to be a featured creator for gaming for the day. And suddenly I go from I think at the time I got 10,000 subscribers from the timeline, which was amazing. And I got 10,000 more subscribers from December to August, which was amazing. And at 20,000 subscribers, I went from there to 50,000 in that August. And my life has been changed ever since. I stopped door dashing, because I went from making no money on YouTube to that first month, I made $3,000 from YouTube, which was more than my main job, which was crazy to me. So I stopped door dashing, which thank God. And because that just drains you. I was just doing YouTube and teaching for that school year. And I liked it. And it worked, but I just wish I could be home more to help with our toddler and our soon to be other kid, where 2 kids is a lot and it takes a village to raise your kids, So, and I want to be there. I hated having a full-time job and a baby / toddler, because I just felt like I was missing so much, which I was. And by the end of that school year, by December, I was making enough between that and substitute teaching that we were able to get our own apartment, which was huge. And we, by the end of that school year, the plan was Amanda's pregnant again. We're going to have a baby. It's going to happen around May. I'm going to take my paternity leave. I'm not going to get a second job for the summer. If by the end of the summer we're doing okay, I'm not going back. And that's what happened. By the end of the summer, we were doing okay. So I didn't go back. And I've been full-time with YouTube ever since. You might be asking, Riley, if you have an apartment, why are you in a basement? I've gone over that on the podcast. We're just going to wait until we get a house at this point because we got fucked over so much by the apartments. Like our apartment started falling apart. And then the one we moved into had roaches in it. So like, we're just like, look, we're going to rent out part of our relative's house until we can just buy a house. Cause I'm not dealing with this anymore. We can't be moving every 3 months with 2 kids and YouTube. It's just not going to work. So that's what we're doing. We're just going to buy a house probably by the end of the year. Fingers crossed. Depending on how this channel goes anyway, if we can get a big enough down payment, that and any mortgage company worth their salt won't look at me until I have 2 years worth of income, which will be this August. So who knows? But yeah, that's why I picked RyeToast. That's the content journey that got us here. But thank you for your question. And we are over time because I took way too long on there, but I can answer this last question pretty quickly. This last question is from Liz. She, her, thank you for your question. My question for the pod is if you have any other games or franchises, movies, TV series too, that you really enjoy and haven't talked about before, and maybe would like to make content on. The media doesn't have to be a part of the horror genre. I'm just curious on the other works you're passionate about. Lore from RyeToast that you may have heard me gush about before. It was a coin flip whether this channel was going to be Pokemon or FNAF centric, because those are the 2 biggest hyperfixations I have, and FNAF took off first. But because of the amazing support this channel has received, I'm able to hire an editor for another channel. I edit all of the RyeToast videos. I have to, because I can't afford to not. But I can afford to pay and eventually revenue split somebody else for the second channel. And I do, Queen Coda. I had 2 editors, and we were doing edited gameplay content where they would take either Queen Coda or Codex would take... didn't mean to hire 2 people with COD in their name, but it just worked out that way. But they would take a stream, and one of them would edit it into an edited video, and I would put it on the channel. I'd pay them, like a business. Then I talked it over with Queen Coda, and we started doing scripted Pokemon content on the second channel. When the first video is out, it's Pal World can't be a Pokemon killer because it's not a Pokemon game. And the next video is going to be about Pokemon Legends ZA. And it's like Pokemon theory content and Pokemon, like not gaming, but like talking like this channel, but for Pokemon. And I'm so excited to do that. So that's on RyeToast. That's what RyeToast is going to turn into for the foreseeable future. And that's my answer. But turns out my wife is calling me, so we're going to end it there. So, again, if you have any questions for the podcast, you can send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.